On Monday of this week, June 3rd, a significant theologian passed away, Jürgen Moltmann. I don't suspect that you've heard his name, but he has had a big impact on theology and the theological perspectives that you tend to hear in church, especially if you're listening to me. In recognition of his passing, let me introduce you to one of his works that have been sitting on my shelf, The Experiences of God. It was published in 1980. In Experiences of God, Moltmann writes about the anxiety that plagued the world in the 1980s. There were fears of nuclear war and pollution, fears of political and economic strife, fears in general about everything. 44 years later, I don't think the world has changed that much. If anything, probably global anxiety has risen since the 80s at about the same rate as the ocean water levels. We've had COVID and climate issues and economy issues and the social media and now AI. For some, there's very good reasons to be fearful, and hope can be hard to hold on to. Moltmann credits our loss of hope to three things. First, he says that we lost hope when we persecuted our Jewish siblings. As a German soldier in World War II, Moltmann needs to first look back and acknowledge the depth of horror that happened. When you kill the hope in your neighbor, you kill it in yourself too. Especially as a church that is supposed to be preaching hope and the promise of a new kingdom of peace. All that hope is destroyed when we participate in these evils or fail to stand in solidarity with those who are oppressed. Whenever we preach one thing about God, but we did another, our hypocrisy hurt not just our neighbors, but our own faith too. Until we really wrestle with our past, our words about hope are going to be empty. A second reason that we in the West are losing hope and are filled with anxiety is, he says, because of our wealth. Our countries have become wealthy at the expense and exploitation of other nations. We like what we have, and we live in fear that we will lose it. Then the more you have to lose. Moltmann writes, "It is impossible to be happy and impossible to be hopeful if one is sitting on an island of prosperity in the midst of a continually rising sea of poverty." Our anxiety is tied to our affluence, and we experience a growing sense of helplessness and doom. He says the key to the rebirth of our hope lies in the place where we buried it, in the exploited and oppressed nations and their liberation. A third reason for the loss of our hope is because of the way we have treated creation. We know full well that we are destroying our planet. We might not think about it every day, but that knowledge is there in the back of our heads. We're not always good at identifying the anxiety that's caused by climate change, but it is hovering there in our minds. Moltmann writes, "Many people feel that although we can build ourselves palaces, we are digging the grave of creation and our own selves at the same time. We shall not win any future against the natural world we live in." So with all these good reasons to fear, how do we hope? Moltmann says that as a Christian theologian, the answer is in Christ and the cross. Christ experienced anxiety too. His anxiety, though, was not just fear of the crucifixion, not just a physical suffering, but a separation from God. God the Father would leave Jesus, would be separate from him, which is why on the cross Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Moltmann says that of the many reasons we fear, at the heart of it, We fear most being separated from God. From this perspective of Christian faith, being separated from God is the worst pain imaginable. It is hell. Not only does Christ understand our fears, not only does he experience them, but he went through something we will never have to. He faced the abandonment of God, so that you know, even there, even in your own personal gardens of Gethsemane, you will not be alone. You will never be abandoned, never separated from Christ. This is what frees us from anxiety. This is what releases us from our fears. Moltmann says, this knowledge frees me to look at my fear squarely and to cease being afraid of it. This is just a small taste of Moltmann's work. While I'm not quoting him directly, you are going to be hearing more about it and the hope that he speaks about in today's sermon.